Alright, so it's been a little bit since I last made a video, and to be honest, I probably wasn't even going to make this video, talk about these things, but here I am talking about them. So I'm actually going to try to cover two subjects if it doesn't run on too long. Charlottesville, late to the party. Like I said, I didn't even want to make a video about it, but there's some things that need to be said, and if I have time and I can get to it, I definitely want to talk about NFL players. I think it was like 9 or 12 brown NFL players kneel during the national anthem at one of the preseason games. I think it was against the Giants. Yeah. So starting off with Charlottesville, Virginia, huge issue, lots of bad things all over the place. It's hard to argue as a conservative, for the left on this issue, but with what we were looking at, which were racist neo-Nazis, and the whole kit and caboodle was there in Charlottesville. Now, I'm not gonna say everybody there was in some type of form a racist or nationalist or whatever, but there was a lot of that there, and it's not something that should be defended or should be condoned. I think at every possible turn, everybody, I don't care what side you're on, should be not condoning that. They should be condemning that and saying that's a bad thing. I don't care if their enemy is my enemy, they can still be my enemy, because that is not something that we need to side with. And I know I say we should all do this, and when I say that, this is just what my perspective of what a conservative should be. So if you don't like it when I say that, I'm sorry. I try not to say it, but it just comes out, and just replace we should all be with my perspective is that we should all. Alright, disclaimer out of the way. So there was evil, there was racism there. You can't argue that, regardless of what your stance is on the issue as far as statues are concerned. We'll get to that. There was evil there. There were racists there. There were nationalists there, and that's not a good thing. They do not need to be defended. They should be condemned, and they should be condemned until they go back into their holes. That being said, the other side of the aisle was not any better. Just because there was evil on one side doesn't mean we need to throw more evil at it. Throwing fire at fire doesn't make for a better world. And I'm specifically talking about Antifa and Black Lives Matter. I don't think they were... Actually, I know they weren't being helpful. I know Antifa a lot of the times brings violence, and they actively speak for violence. Black Lives Matter doesn't really speak for violence that I've heard of, like anybody officially from Black Lives Matter, but I know I've never seen them condemn violence, and I've never seen, oh, this is not what we're about. And I've looked it up, I've searched the internet, I've scoured it. If they have somewhere, throw it at me so that I can know, because this is something I've actually looked for. Nowhere Black Lives Matter do they condemn violence from within. They definitely condemn violence when the right is doing it, or when racists are doing it, white racists. But what are you going to do about that? So we have two groups of extremely violent people. Three groups. Sorry, my bad. I'll just use Unite the Right as the whole group that was there as far as concerning the racists. If you were there and you aren't a racist, and you still stuck by, you saw some guy with a swastika on his head and other guys saying Jews don't belong here or Jews will not replace us, and you stuck by that, you're kind of leaning towards them. So I'm not going to really defend anybody who was standing by those people and marching by those people either. No one was right. In Charlottesville, everybody was wrong. I'll say it, no one was right. Everyone was wrong. Anybody involved. And the worst part about it is that it escalated to a point where somebody died. So I think that's a huge issue as well, is that you got these two huge conflicting forces, and all they're doing is just making each other angrier, and then it just goes up and up and up and up, and then somebody dies. So what do you do about that? And how do we not do that anymore? And I think something that should be said is that there were a lot of reports of how the police officers were containing all the protests. Now, this isn't a jab at police officers, but this is definitely something that should be recognized, is a lot of reports were saying that the police officers were pushing everyone together, and I'm sure they were trying to contain everybody in one area to make it a little bit easier on the police force. But when you just push fire and gasoline together, you're just gonna get an explosion. So I think that was huge hindsight for the police department. I think that could have been handled a lot better, and it probably should have. Something that could have been avoided for sure. Alright, so we established everybody was wrong, no one was right, and everybody should be condemned, and we should go no to everybody, and hopefully everyone everywhere can agree that violence is bad. No one should be hitting anybody for any reason whatsoever. Continuing, the issue of the statue itself, me personally, I don't particularly care about statues. I mean, they're there. I never look at statues when they're in parks and I go, wow, that's a cool statue. And there has never been one point where I saw a statue and I took time to take a look at a statue and go, oh, now I remember, like I forgot the history. Nobody's gonna forget history, and nobody's trying to erase history. I think there's a solid argument to not have statues, or at least Confederate statues, especially Confederate statues, on public property. I think, I mean, think about it. If let's say you were a confirmed descendant of slavery, would you really want your tax dollars going towards that? Somebody who is really trying to chug along and defend that? I wouldn't be too happy about it either. So I can actually sympathize and empathize with those people on that side who don't want that there. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, you don't have to chuck the statue and throw it away. Move it to a museum. That's where it belongs. I mean, the Confederate flag, those statues, I don't think they belong on public property. I don't think we should be glorifying anything the South stood for. The only thing, and I've had this conversation with some friends of mine, the only thing that the South, in my opinion, one of the only things that they had right was states' rights over federal rights, or federal governing. I think that was a good idea, but almost everything else I'm not for, and I don't condone it, and I don't think anyone should. So I think you should take this Confederate flag, you should take those statues, don't throw them away, you don't have to forget about them, we don't have to try to erase it like it never happened, but throw it in a museum, throw a big plaque on that museum that says everything from the worst era of American history, because that was a particularly ugly time, and I mean, there were some good things about it, but I mean, there was a handful of equally bad things about it as well, and I don't think we should be glorifying that or be trying to ignore that part of it. I mean, because you see these people and they defend the Confederate flag, they go, it's our history, it's our heritage, it's not hate, it's our heritage, and you just think about that, and you go, I mean, yeah, it's your history, but you know what? Germany's history is also the Nazi party, and they're not particularly proud about that, and they don't want to. I mean, I think Germany actually tries to actively forget about that, and you can't, and you shouldn't, but you also shouldn't be trying to glorify it or try to make it represent something better than it actually was, because at the end of the day, one of the big things about the South is that it wanted slavery, and the North was not for the expansion of slavery, at the very least. I mean, even the tipping point for the South seceding was the election of Abraham Lincoln, who was not for the expansion of slavery. So that, I mean, and how do you defend that? I mean, I understand states' rights over federal rights, but how do you defend, like, How you go, I mean, yeah, but slavery, no, there's nothing about it. And I mean, I'm not a huge guy that thinks we should give reparations for slavery or anything, but I'm not going to say slavery was a good thing, and I'm not going to try to defend slavery. I'm not going to try to defend the Confederacy, because the other part of the Confederacy is that it was treason. I mean, I think the Confederate flag kind of stands for something anti-American, because it was made to go against the United States of America and create the Confederate States of America. So I mean, and I'm probably kind of alone with that issue, at least on this side of the aisle. And that's not a huge thing. I'm not really worried about the treason part. I'm mostly just worried about the racist part, because I mean, because that's a huge issue. Slavery was a huge issue, and if me personally, I'd rather not be paying for Robert E. Lee statues either. You look at that stuff and you go, how do you glorify that? How do you defend that? That's like defending the Charlottesville people, or at least the people themselves. Maybe what they were, actually no, just that's like defending the people in Charlottesville. I was there for a second where I was defending them, but that was that knee-jerk reaction of defending the right and going against the left. But defending Charlottesville, you just can't do it. And I don't know how people defend either side. I think everybody collectively should go bad, and that's what everybody should do with slavery and people who defended slavery and people who fought for slavery. And that's just my stance on it. And that was kind of a rant, but that's a huge thing. Slavery is not something that was good, and I've had this conversation, and there was a lot of a lot of defenses, like slavery wasn't the worst part of American history, brought up like Japanese internment camps, and it just doesn't wash with me. There's another defense where somebody was saying that it's not America didn't start it, white people didn't start it, Africa started. Yeah, Africa started. Good job. America still participated. That doesn't make it any better. And again, I don't think anyone on any side of the aisle should be defending it and defending the Confederacy or Confederate statues. They lost, and that's a good thing. Let's end it. Let's put them in museums. Fine. I'm all for preserving history and letting everybody know what the history was, but don't preserve it or don't glorify it, and don't try to make it better than what it was. Don't try to give it excuses or defend it. I mean, I understand. I'm really bad about this too. Knee-jerk reactions of being on the right and just defending whatever the left is attacking. I'm really bad about it, because like I said, when I was when I was on the side of Charlottesville protesters, the Unite the Right protesters, I wanted to defend them at first, and I looked into it, and I saw that they were being violent. I saw that they were actually racist, and they weren't just there to protest. I heard what they were saying. You will not replace us. Jews will not replace us. I mean, how do you defend that, and how do you tolerate that? And that's just as an American. That isn't even as a conservative or liberal. We shouldn't be defending that, and we shouldn't be condoning that. We should be actively saying that's terrible, and we don't want that, because that's not what conservatism is about. Okay, that was long and drawn out, so I'm sorry about that. I'm done. I'm passionate about that, because that's just long. Anyway, so I guess we do have some time, so we're gonna go over the football players. Who cares? Like, who actually cares? That should be the thing that you see when you see that headline. So and so kneeled for 13, 12, 9 players of this team. Who cares? Who actually cares? I don't care what they do during the national anthem. And I mean, I guess it's an issue and we got to discuss it. But it's just like, I saw a headline yesterday on how Donald Trump looked at the solar eclipse without glasses. That was the headline. That's pretty much the whole headline. I was like, and at the end was, after being warned not to do that. Who cares? I don't care if somebody wants to burn their retinas or wants to take the chance. Go for it. I don't care. Why is that news? Why? And that was by Business Insider in their political section. All right, I'm gonna move past that. We're talking about NFL players. Who cares? I mean, I think there's rules in the NBA where you have to stand for the national anthem. I believe I discussed that. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. That's the last thing I heard or what I can remember. There's no rules that dictate as such in the NFL, and that should be the deciding voice. If they said if there's no rules for it, doesn't matter, whatever. And I think when people say you need to stand for the national anthem, that defeats the purpose. Because their thing is people died so you could do that. You're disrespect. It's like, if people died so I could do this, and you're telling me I can't do this, you're defeating the purpose of why they died. I mean, and I understand. I'm not. I mean, both my parents are military. I definitely respect everyone in the military, and I hold everyone in that capacity in very high regards. And I don't think that they should. Me personally, I would never do anything to disrespect them, because there's a lot that, I mean, how do you get up and go, hey, I'm gonna do this job, I might die, but okay, like that takes guts, and that's not just a whatever kind of decision. That being said, I think as an American, if you're going to fight for somebody's rights, part of those rights is that First Amendment, and being able to protest or freedom of speech, whatever you want to say it, is part of that First Amendment right. So they're respecting them all the same, because they're using that First Amendment right that they fought for, in my opinion. That's my perspective. I don't know if that's a conservative perspective. It doesn't seem like it. But I've seen people actually say, if you want to protest, go to another country to protest. It's like, that's what? So we can't protest in this country? I don't know, this stupid random person, but we can't protest in this country, and we can't have our freedom of speech in this country. You guys are defeating the purpose of what conservatives stand for. I mean, for all I know, there's no such thing as constitutional liberal. I know there are constitutional conservatives, and those are people who go, does it say it in the Constitution? Then that's what we need to be doing. I don't, and that the right are the people who defend the Constitution and want to fight for the Constitution, and I know there are liberals out there are liberals that are very that follow what the Constitution says. I know that's a thing. I'm not saying that nobody on the left follows the Constitution, but it's not I don't know if it's a dedicated like school of thought. But that being said, they should be allowed, and if the NFL and that being said, if they're gonna do that, they should have to deal with the consequences. I understand that they'll have consequences to deal with, and that's something that they should understand as well. Is a very large percentage of the NFL, to my knowledge, are super patriotic, and they don't like it when people do that. So if you're going to do that, you're going to kneel, and your ratings just drop, and nobody's watching the NFL anymore. That's just a consequence you have to deal with. So if you're okay with stepping up to those consequences, and you're ready to accept those, then fine, go ahead, do your thing. But if you're gonna kneel and you're going to protest or whatever during the national anthem, and then your ratings drop, you're not allowed to go, well, that's racist or whatever, or I'm trying to do freedom of speech or whatever. You understand you should understand what your decisions are and what are going to be the far-reaching consequences. Because if you haven't thought through these things and you're not ready to accept them, I don't really think you've thought your protest through, and you don't really care about it. At that point, you're pretty much just virtue signaling. I mean, I've listened to some of these players talk about why they protested, and it's like, yeah, we're just sitting, we're just kneeling, we just want to say a prayer for the social injustice in America. And I'm just, what does that mean? You're not saying anything. You're saying every single buzzword that the least amount you could say about why you protest. That's what you said. Literally, the only other thing you could have said that would have been less is just social injustice, and just that was it. And that's the only less thing these guys could say. They're not saying. I mean, at least when Colin Kaepernick did it, he kind of went into it a little bit more, and not defending Colin Kaepernick either, because I mean, he hasn't accepted his consequences yet. He's still whining about it. People around him are still whining about it. I mean, these people think that Colin Kaepernick doesn't have a job because of his protests. I'm sorry, my bad, I got that wrong. They don't think he's got a job because the NFL is racist. When he's a terrible quarterback, and not only, let's say they did pick it. Let's say somebody's like, all right, let's get Colin back in here. Let's try to build him up again. But now you have to deal with all of the dramas and the headaches with all your fans. Like, let's say you went somewhere super patriotic. What's a part of the country that would just be like insane? Texas, just off the top of my head. So they say you went to the Cowboys. You know how mad the Cowboy fans, at least the Cowboy fans I've met, how mad they would be if the Cowboys picked up Colin Kaepernick. They would just, and imagine being like the head coach or the owner having to deal with that backlash. That's not worth it, man. That's not worth it. No, I'd be like, no, Colin, stand for the pledge, or we ain't signing the deal. He's got too much baggage right now. He's not good enough. I mean, if he's Tom Brady level, I'm pretty sure he'd have a job. I'm pretty sure no one would care. Cowboy fans will be like, yeah, I mean, I feel like social injustice is wrong too. I mean, everybody do 180, and I don't blame them. They want a good football team. They want to see good games. They don't watch the NFL to see politics. And then, I mean, during the national anthem, there's no game anyway. But that's just a point where you're representing. And I mean, as far as I know, I didn't follow the Browns too closely, but they're not a particularly good team either. I think this would be a really interesting case to look at if like the New England Patriots were like sitting out of the national anthem. And now I want to see how people react if like Tom Brady was sitting down. That would be an interesting topic to see, because I mean, nobody really cares about the Browns. Nobody cares about Colin Kaepernick. So when they do that, I mean, the two sides just stay the same. They shouldn't be doing that. They're disrespecting people who served in the military, and then the other side is they have a right, you're being racist, blah blah blah. So but at the end of the day, no one should care. No one should care. Everyone should go, he's sitting down. That seems kind of rude. Oh well, let's see if they play good. That should be it. That should be the end of it. We shouldn't even be. I don't care if you. One of my favorite football players right now is Von Miller, the Denver Broncos. Denver Broncos is my favorite team. If Von Miller sat down in protest during the national anthem, I go, that kind of sucks. That'd be it. That's it. Game over. That's it. Because I mean, he's got a First Amendment right to do it. That's his prerogative. He can have whatever opinions he wants, and he doesn't have to agree with me. Because I mean, once you start policing people's thoughts, and let's say conservatives were able to just bully everybody into standing. Let's say the Browns are like, okay, fine, we'll stand. Now everybody knows that they have that power, that they can just bully people into thinking, and then you have a thought police. and we shouldn't have a thought police ever. And it's not good. If it's not good for us, it's not good for them. I mean, let's say everybody was sitting. It was just you just were expected to disrespect America during the national anthem. It is culture norm, and there's some like extreme Republicans that would just stand up, and you're part of those extreme Republicans. You'd stand up and you'd be patriotic, and everybody was. I mean, wouldn't you defend yourself? That was kind of all over the place. You could disregard that last point. I'm kind of tired, but what I'm saying is, if you were disrespecting somebody, so let's say you were disrespecting Martin Luther King Jr. just because you didn't personally agree, you just had a different school of thought. Everybody would be trashing you, and everybody on the right agreed, and everybody on the left disagreed. And now everybody, but more people were like, no, that's wrong. It wouldn't be okay for the left to shame you and thought police you into standing up for Martin Luther King Jr. the song. It just wouldn't. I don't think so. And that's the only thing I can think of, not to separate Martin Luther King Jr. from Republicans or Republicans from race. But I just can't think of a good parallel right now. But that's the thing. We shouldn't be thought policing. And, I mean, it's not good when the left does it. And it's not good when the right does it. And I don't think anyone should be doing it. And that's what my perspective of conservatives should be, is that we should all be just working together to build each other up. I mean, you know what? Let's say, I mean, what if for a second we just said, okay, why are you kneeling? Okay, and then you opened up that conversation. Wouldn't it be so much more to open up that conversation? I mean, maybe not with those particular players, but you found somebody who was like, yeah, they should, instead of just saying that they should go to another country, or that they should go protest in another country. Maybe ask them, hey, this is my perspective. I mean, and it's got to be the right forum. Don't do it on Facebook. You're never getting anything done on Facebook. But if you have friends and people that you're close to that you can talk to them and just go, what do you think about this? What is a way for us all to approach to find some happy medium? Because I'm not against, and nobody should be against talking to anyone. I'm not particularly fond of listening to liberals, and I don't like the Young Turks or anything, but I don't think just because I don't listen to them doesn't mean I wouldn't talk to them and wouldn't have that conversation. And at that point, I would listen to them. And you gotta have that openness, because at the end of the day, we all live together, and if we refuse to talk to each other, we can't have a society anymore. I've had that conversation before with one of my old bosses. He said he was on the left. It was right after Donald Trump got elected. He said he's considering never talking to any of his friends that voted for Donald Trump ever again. He just said that. He said that outright, and I told him, hey, we can't have a society anymore. And it was heartbreaking to see that somebody was just done. It's like, I'm done with society. And go, that's it? That's all it took to break you? I mean, I understand you don't like Donald Trump, or you don't like who advocates for Donald Trump or whatever, but that doesn't mean it's okay just to cut everyone out. I mean, he's come around since, and we've had really good conversations, and we had a conversation over Charlottesville, and it's good that we actually had that conversation, but we shouldn't be shutting people out. And again, I'm gonna end on this note. I'm gonna stop, because I've been going insane. It doesn't matter what NFL players do during the national anthem. You shouldn't care. You should never, ever, 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 ever care. The end. See you guys next time.